critical proposition that until you gain self-mastery, everything else in your life will always seem a bit out of control. You'll never step into the full capacity, the full potential that you were created to live at. That there's an aspect to who we are that cannot be produced by anyone else. It has to actually be the product of our own choices. And sometimes this becomes a little confusing because when you're a person of faith, when you put your trust in Jesus, a huge part of the language that we have is, well, you just need to let Jesus do it, and you just need to trust God to make it happen. And so what happens so oftentimes is that our journey of faith causes us to abdicate those areas in our life where we have to take mastery over ourselves. And so we focus together, beginning with the concept of ownership, that until you take ownership for your life, you will not have the power to bring the change that your life so desperately needs, that you so desperately want to bring to your own life, to your own future, to your own personhood. And yes, there is this powerful interplay between you and God, that there are things in your life that you cannot do for yourself, that only God can do for you. But there are things in your life that you must do for yourself, and God will never take them out of your hands. He will give you the power. He will give you the strength. He will be with you in his presence, but he will not do it for you. He's going to empower you and hold you responsible to make those choices. Ownership is at the center of resilience. But we also saw how not only is ownership critical to self-mastery, but so is mindset. And that the filter through which we process thoughts, the way that we deal with the battle of our inner world, the way we're able to take every thought captive is critical to our own self-mastery. You will either take control over your thoughts or your thoughts will take control over you. And we began to unwrap how this dynamic of ownership and mindset, moving into clarity, will be one of the critical aspects of your ability to be resilient throughout your life. And the last aspect that I want to focus on in this framework of self-mastery is energy. Now, I know a lot of times when we talk about self-mastery, there ends up being a conversation about time management, about how we organize our day, how we schedule our time. And I know some people are very structured, some people are more unstructured, and the aspects of personal discipline can become hugely significant in our ability to take mastery over our lives. But let me tell you, far more important than time management is energy management. So oftentimes we don't actually think about ourselves as energy machines or energy creatures. We both expend energy and we have to replenish that energy. And I want to just give this disclaimer. We live here in Los Angeles. We're right here in the heart of Hollywood. And so the language of energy is a huge part of the LA culture. And it's one of those words that my wife, Kim, has always hated. Whenever someone would say, oh, he has such great energy, Kim would just cringe. Or when people talk about the energy in the room or affecting each other's energy, and it would just drive her crazy. And then, of course, it just seems like it went off to all kinds of extremes, from energy rocks to crystals that give you energy. And frankly, over the last 30 years, I think she feels like she's lost the battle. Because 30 years ago, the language of energy was a really, really esoteric space where if you used that language, you were just on the fringe. But the world has changed. I mean, now we have energy bars and we have energy drinks and we have an entire language and an entire industry around energy. And in fact, now we understand, and by the way, this is scientific, that we human beings, even though we feel ourselves as the composition of flesh and blood, we are actually pure energy. And this is an extraordinary thing. It would almost seem like it was superstition or mythology 100 years ago if we had talked about human beings actually being energy. The idea that matter and energy are the same thing would seem to be magic or superstition or witchcraft. And yet now we know scientifically that even though we experience a part of our reality as something incredibly solid. We see the stool, or there's a table, or the floor, or the building, and we think of that as matter. And then we see lights, and we think of that as energy. But the reality is that everything is energy. It's just energy moving at different speeds and expressing itself in different ways. And so the language of energy is actually at the center of reality. But more than that, it's in the center of how we exist as human beings. Even though time, in a sense, is constantly in motion, there's a sense where time is also static. There are always 60 seconds in a minute. There are always 60 minutes in an hour. There are always 24 hours in a day. There are always 7 days in a week. There are always 365 days in a year, 12 months in a year. And what we sometimes forget is that we cannot change that static nature of time. We all have the same minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years until they're gone. And so what makes a minute dynamic is not the 60 seconds. It's not the time. It's the energy. What will change a moment, what will take a minute and transform it into a moment that has momentum, is the amount of energy you bring into that moment. Now, one of the fascinating things to me in the life of Jesus, because when I think about Jesus, I think of someone with unlimited energy. And yet what we find is that Jesus, being fully man, actually expended energy, found himself exhausted and tired, and had a moment in his life where the power that was in him actually went out from him to someone else. It's in Luke chapter 8, beginning in verse 40. Let's read from verse 40 to verse 48. It says, "Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. A man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman who was there, who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him, speaking of Jesus, and touched the edge of his cloak. And immediately her bleeding stopped. 'Who touched me?' Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, 'Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you.' But Jesus said, 'Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me.' Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, 'Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace.'" Now, I know this is so much outside of our Western language, but what is happening in this moment is that there is a transference of energy from Jesus to this woman. There's a transference of power from Jesus to this woman. I mean, the moment has its absurdity. I mean, Jesus is pressing through a crowd. People are pressing through him. And I don't know if you've ever been in the Middle East or in the middle of a bazaar or a fair, but I remember walking the streets of Damascus, and there was people everywhere, and people are pressing up against each other, and he's working his way through the crowd. And I've known those moments in my life where the crowd is so tight and the people so thick that you almost can't even breathe. You're just pressing person against person against person. And Jesus is in the middle of a crowd. People are pressing against him. And all of a sudden he says, "Who touched me?" Someone touched me. And disciples are saying, "Jesus, everyone touched you." What do you mean someone touched you? What's interesting is that Jesus actually interacted with an endless number of people, but there was no transference of energy or power. That so many people pressed up against the Son of God. Can you imagine being in physical contact with God and having nothing happen when you're passing by? And it seems that the transference of energy required intention, that the woman actually pressed toward Jesus and touched him with intention. She had been sick for 12 years and hoped that somehow touching Jesus would allow his ability to heal to touch her life and heal her. She doesn't even get to his body. She just touches his cloak. But the intention of that moment transferred his power and healed her. And she realized in that moment that she'd been caught. Can you imagine, in a sense, like stealing something from God or taking something from God without permission? And then God stopping that moment and saying, who touched me? And she knew exactly why he was asking the question. It wasn't who touched me. It was who touched me, who reached out for me with intention. That my power would go from me to them to bring the healing they needed. And when the woman finally exposed herself, she was trembling and fell at his feet in the presence of everyone and acknowledged it had been her and how she'd been instantly healed. And then Jesus confirms on her the reality of what just happened. Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Now, the reason I highlight this moment, it's not a moment that's really highlighted a lot in the scriptures. It's one of those moments in the life of Jesus that doesn't really fit into our more controlled understanding of how God works in the world. But we need to realize that this moment gives us an insight to how energy transfers and how the power of God in this moment brought healing to this person who reached out to God and asked God for help. And I began to wonder if Jesus could actually feel power leaving him, how much more does that actually apply to us? See, the reality is that we are both consumers and conduits of energy. We both expend energy every day, and we also consume energy every day. Now, for years, I heard, and I don't know if this is true because medicine always seems to change its mind about things, but I've always been told that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now, I absolutely believe that as long as what you mean by breakfast is coffee. Now, every day I go get my breakfast and it's called a cappuccino. And that's my breakfast. I need that caffeine. And the reason I need that caffeine is that inside of that cocoa bean that is crushed and pressed, grounded, and then where the juices are extricated, you see what is happening is that the barista is like a magician. The barista has the ability to extract out of that bean all the energy I need for that morning. We don't call it energy, we call it caffeine. And a lot of us are addicted to caffeine. Why? Because we need that external source of energy to get us going throughout the day. Because some of us are not morning people. Now, Kim is a morning person, and I'm outnumbered. Aaron is a morning person, and Mariah is a morning person. I'm a morning person if it counts that sometimes I go to sleep in the morning, but I'm actually, and I've always been a night person. And in the morning, I wake up, but I'm not one of those people that just pops out of bed full of energy, excited about the day. In fact, sometimes it just used to frustrate me when Kim would wake up and she would be so loud because she was so happy and she did not want to be alone. So she wanted to make sure she woke me up. She just has all this natural energy in the morning, but her energy starts high and then it dissipates and it lands way before the sun sets. And somewhere around 3 or 4 o'clock, she's exhausted and she's like, I need to take a nap. And I never take naps. Because about that time, my energy is actually elevating, it's escalating. And so our relationship to energy and the time of day is, well, virtually incompatible. And but at the same time, I love the fact that she has so much energy in the morning, and I hope she appreciates the fact that I have a lot of energy later in the day. And she knows that there are certain things that actually energize me in the morning. I can actually hear bacon. And long before I smell it, I can hear it. And sometimes she'll cook breakfast, and I'll hear the bacon, and then I smell the aroma of the bacon. I don't know what happens. Just the aroma of the bacon gives me energy. I start getting energized. Have you ever found yourself exhausted and suddenly something from the external environment begins to energize you? It should make you aware of the fact that we humans are actually energy machines. And if we do not learn how to manage our energy, we will not learn the power of self-mastery. Now, one of the great challenges is that there are not only things that energize us, but there are things that steal our energy. I remember one time I had been traveling quite a bit. The kids were a lot younger, and I'd been gone, I think, over a week, maybe 2 weeks. And I walked into the house and I'm not sure why. Maybe Kim was like stressed and she probably just felt the pressure of parenting and taking care of everything while I was gone. But the moment I walked in, before she said hello and before she said, I love you, she said, hey, would you take out the garbage? Now I knew that was Kim's way of saying, I'm so happy you're home and I love you. And when she said, will you take out the garbage? I did not respond well. I said, I just walked in. I'm exhausted. I've been on a plane all day. Could I just sit and rest? I'm really tired. And then she felt bad. She goes, I'm sorry. Just sit down and rest. And then a few minutes later, I got a phone call from one of the guys. And he said, hey, Erwin, we heard you were home and we got a basketball gym. Do you want to come play basketball? And all of a sudden, I mean, I was so tired. But now I was like energized. I got so excited, and I said, "Wait a minute, give me a minute. Let me talk to Kim." And it's not that I need to ask for permission. It's just that I want to be happy. And so I went up to Kim and I said, "Honey, after I take out the garbage, would it be okay if I go play basketball with the guys?" And she goes, "What?" I said, yeah, I just got a call from the guys. And I know you know how important it is to hang out with men and to spend time with the guys. And so after I take out the garbage, would it be okay if I go play basketball? She goes, oh, no, you're so tired. You're just so exhausted. There's no way you can go play basketball. You're just exhausted. I go, honey, I was so exhausted, but now I just have so much energy. And, I can take out the garbage and go play ball. And she goes, so let me get this right. Let me get this straight. You've been gone for 2 weeks. You just got home. And what you want to do is go play basketball. I said, well, when you put it like that, it doesn't sound so good. But then she goes, sure, you go right ahead, which is another story, by the way, in a different application, because when she said, sure, go right ahead, I knew that she didn't mean that there was a subtext, that she was saying, if I choose to go play basketball rather than be with her, it's going to be a long, long, difficult week for me. But that's not my point right now. My point is this. I really was exhausted when she asked me to take out the garbage. And I was strangely and unexpectedly energized the moment I even thought about going to play basketball. See, the reality is that life has different effects on us. And it changes the energy dynamic inside of us. And you need to be careful if you're only doing things that cost you energy and you're not spending time doing things that also replenish your energy. And people expend and replenish energy differently. Now, there are really only two arenas where you expend energy: in your inner world and the outside world. You expend energy in your inner world, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. You expend energy in the outer world, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But in those worlds, there are these epicenters that consume energy. And let me just kind of highlight a few of those. Because I know in my life, sometimes one of these epicenters consumes more energy than another one. One of the epicenters that consumes energy are problems, crisis, challenges. And so when you're facing a problem, when you have a crisis, when you have a challenge, it'll consume energy. Long before you ever have to face the crisis or deal with the problem or face the challenge, you begin to expend energy just trying to solve the problem. Have you ever had a problem and all you can do is think about the problem? All you can do is think about how to solve the problem, and you cannot figure out how to solve the problem. So you're just feeling the anxiety, the stress of the problem. And in fact, when you actually face the problem, it's not nearly as bad as all the scenarios you created in your head. When you are processing problems and crises, it actually costs you energy. And what's so interesting is that so oftentimes our ratio is way off. We'll spend 90% of the time thinking about the problem, worrying about the problem, and 10% of the time solving the problem and doing something about the problem. But here's the crazy thing. Thinking about the problem and worrying about the problem costs you energy. Actually, solving the problem will most likely give you energy. And yet we spend less time doing the very thing in relationship to the problem that gives us energy, and most of the time on the part that actually costs us energy. So, quick strategy. When you have a problem, when you're facing a crisis, when you have a challenge, spend 10% of the time worrying about it, thinking about it, and trying to solve it in your head, and 90% of your time solving the problem, doing something about it, and getting it out of your field of concern. Problems are one area where we all expend energy, but another one is people. It's relationships. In fact, I think this might be one of the highest consumers of our energy. Navigating relationships, if I can say this politely, is exhausting. I mean, this planet would be perfect if it wasn't for people, right? And have you ever thought your life would be great except the people in your life? But the reality is that the people in your life also bring the greatest beauty and wonder and joy and fulfillment. And so the reality is that people are both our greatest gift and our greatest challenge. But navigating relationships can be an incredible point of consuming energy in your life, especially when those relationships are unhealthy. Unhealthy relationships consume energy. They will just suck you dry of all the energy you have. In fact, everything in life can be going great. And if you have unhealthy relationships, you will feel as if you have no energy for life. You'll have a hard time going to sleep at night or have a hard time waking up in the morning because that energy consumption is tearing you apart. And so one of the great choices we have in life is to allow broken, dysfunctional, unhealthy, unproductive relationships to consume all of our energy, or to move with courage and deliberation toward creating healthy relationships in our life. It's one of the reasons Jesus talks so much about forgiveness. It's one of the reasons he actually talked to us about the destructive power of bitterness. Forgiveness is one of the ways that we can keep moving our relationships toward health. And it's a beautiful thing. When there's health in our relationships become a source of energy. When our relationships lack health, they become a source of consuming energy in our life. I don't know if there's anything in my life that consumes more energy than unhealthy relationships. There's also another source of energy consumption, and I would call it work. And I don't mean work in a negative way. It's the whole aspect of the creative process. It's everything about what you're producing in your life. Work takes energy. Well, I hope it does. Otherwise, you're not doing a very good job. When you go to work, that's why it's called work. It's because it takes energy to accomplish the task. And so oftentimes what happens is that our jobs become a source where they only consume our energy rather than replenish our energy. I know this may be a crazy concept, but your job can actually give you energy. Because when you love your work, it energizes you. When you love your job, it energizes you. When you love the people you work with, it energizes you. When you love the end game, the end product of what you're doing, it energizes you. Your work can actually become a source of energy. It can actually energize you, and you get up in the morning and you want to go to work. I mean, one of the worst statements in the world is, thank God it's Friday. It should be, thank God it's Monday. I mean, the ideal situation is when the weekend is your ramp-up time because you're so excited for Monday because you get to go to work. Why in the world would you want to suffer through 5 days a week to survive 2 days a week rather than to have 2 days to replenish and 5 days to enjoy the creative process of work? Now, if your work is not energizing and your work is stealing energy, there might be a couple of reasons for that. One is that your job may be unfulfilling. You're doing something that doesn't actually fulfill you. It's not really in alignment with God's purpose for your life. And so you go to work and it's unfulfilling. And so every time you go to work and you use your energy to get the job done, all it does is it costs you energy because it's unfulfilling and it doesn't enrich your life. And another reason it may actually cost you energy is that it's unchallenging. You may actually have a job where you're not being challenged enough. It's just too easy for you. And so there isn't a sense of reward because it doesn't actually challenge your life. And so it can actually be unfulfilling. It's not in alignment with God's purpose for you, but it also can be unchallenging. It's not really in alignment with your capacity. And you've chosen a job that doesn't actually call out of you the best that you have. But it also may be that your job is simply unrewarding, that it doesn't give you a sense that you're doing something that matters in the world. And I think the great tragedies is if it's in your control to choose your work, why work at a job that is unrewarding and unchallenging and unfulfilling? I think sometimes what happens is that we sell our souls for way too little money. We take a job and we take a paycheck because we're so afraid of what might happen if we don't have that job. And what I would say to you is if you have a job that is unrewarding, unfulfilling, and unchallenging, then don't quit that job. While you have that job, start looking for another job. But find work that actually matches who you are and what you're created to do in life. And if that isn't possible right now, then you bring meaning to your work. And then you find ways to bring meaning to your life outside of your work. Because one of the greatest things you can do that bring meaning to your work is sometimes you have a job. I mean, I remember I was digging ditches for a season in my life. I didn't feel like that was my life mission. I didn't think that's what I was created to do. But you know, when you're digging ditches and you realize that the paycheck is giving you freedom to get to do some other things that you love, you're just financing your dreams. And you're also financing your future. But your work can be a place that actually consumes so much of your energy. So your energy might be getting depleted because of crisis, problems, conflict. It might be depleted because of relationships that are out of alignment or unhealthy. It might be depleted because of your work and what you have to accomplish every day in your life. But I think the place where energy is really consumed are through negative emotions. Negative emotions will eat up more of your energy than anything else in your life. And I think it's fascinating that the scriptures talk so much about negative emotions and positive emotions. I mean, the Bible cannot be more clear that we should release from our lives things like bitterness and jealousy and envy and greed and avarice, that we have to relinquish from our lives hate. And we need to relinquish from our life and unforgiveness unwillingness to forgive and an unwillingness to ask for forgiveness. That negative emotions will destroy us. Nothing will consume the energy of your soul more than negative emotions. And one of the amazing things about it is that positive, healthy emotions actually energize you. I mean, it's not only just better to live a life of love. Love is energizing. And it's not just better for you to live a life of hope. Hope is energizing. It is not just better to live a life of faith. Faith is energizing. See, it's not just better to live a life of compassion and generosity. It's not just better to live a life where you're trying to make the world a better place and to do all the good you can. It actually is energizing. Here's the crazy thing. Serving others actually is energizing when you're doing it for the right reasons with the right intention and motive. And so even right now, you may be on a spectrum of this energy process where you're living your life where everything is draining you of your energy. And you may be so drained of energy, you don't even know how to reacclimate yourself and to realign yourself to have energy again. And the beginning point, strangely enough, is not sitting there trying to wait for energy to come. Energy comes in motion. And so if you find yourself lacking the passion to be alive, lacking the motivation to get up and do something, lacking the energy to live your life to the fullest, the starting point is to get up and do something good for someone else. The starting point is to get up and serve someone who needs you to serve them. The starting point is to get up and start acting in a manner that reflects the person you want to become. And the action creates energy. You know, I have an electric car, which I love because for the last several years, I've never had to fill it up with gas. I love the fact that I have a zero carbon imprint in the world through my car. I love the fact that I'm helping bring electric vehicles into the future of humanity. But the other day, I had to drive to up to the Santa Barbara area. And on the way back, my car ran out of energy and it redirected me. This is one of the fascinating things about the computer on my car is that even if I'm unaware of it, when I'm driving somewhere, it will tell me all of a sudden, you don't have the energy to make it. And it redirects me. It actually sends me to a charging station and tells me this is where you're going. And you ever just been so much in a hurry that you didn't want to stop to get gas, or so much in a hurry you didn't want to stop and refuel? I was in that kind of mode. I just want to get where I'm going. I'm late. I want to get there on time. And my car actually said to me, no, You're not going to keep going, because if you keep going, you're going to die. You're going to get off and you're going to recharge. See, I wish all of us had that mechanism inside of our souls. Because sometimes we're just so focused on what we're trying to do, so determined to get something done, so, intent on getting the job done or just being efficient. And God is trying to tell us, you're not going to make it if you don't refuel. You don't have the energy to go forward. And one of the critical things in our lives is not just to manage our time, but to manage our energy and to realize that God has designed you in such a way that you're not supposed to just expend energy. You're not supposed to just let the power leave you. You're supposed to make sure that you are also receiving the power that you need. And I think it's so fascinating that Jesus says that we will receive his Spirit. And the word that Jesus uses is dunamis, that we will receive the power of the Holy Spirit. And that word dunamis is the word where we get the word dynamite. And what God is actually telling us is that when we live in communion with him, when we live in the presence of God, when Jesus dwells within us and his Spirit energizes us, we receive the dunamis, the dynamite power of God to energize us to live the life that God has created us to live. Now, even if I was desperate, I could not go to a gas station and recharge my electric vehicle because it's the wrong kind of fuel. And sometimes when we're trying to live our lives in alignment with Jesus, but we start thinking, oh, what's going to energize me is more stuff. So if I can just have a nicer car or a nicer house, what's going to energize me is more stuff. So I can just maybe have nicer clothes or have nicer people or have a nicer girlfriend or boyfriend. Maybe if I can just have a better job or make more money or if I can just have more bling or more things. And we actually think those things will give us the energy we need to live our lives. And that's like trying to get gas for an electric car because you have been redesigned by God to live in his intention. And it's his energy, his presence, his Spirit that is the only source that can actually fuel us most powerfully and most deeply and most profoundly. And as we live our lives in alignment with his purpose for our lives, we find life energizing. Let me tell you, there may be no more beautiful thing to have people in your life that actually energize you. I've been around people that have cost me energy. I mean, I've been in meetings with people where I just feel I'm so drained after having invested in their lives. But I'm also really thankful for those individuals in my life. I just enjoy them. They just replenish my energy. They just fuel my soul. And time with them is time where I'm actually being replenished, even while they're being replenished. Those are the best kind of relationships, the best kind of friendships, where both you walk away feeling more energized because you were with each other. I actually love problems, and problems actually energize me because I've learned that problems are just a promise that something extraordinary is on the other side. And when you can see problems as an opportunity to solve something that needs to be solved, to do something that maybe no one else could do, problems can actually be exciting, they can be exhilarating, they can actually bring incredible joy. And when you realize that work is not supposed to be simply a place that drains you of your energy, but work can be enriching and fulfilling and satisfying and dynamic and rewarding, and that work is actually part of the creative process. And when you create, it not only costs you energy, it actually replenishes your energy. And at the same time, when you realize that your emotions are the seed of the dominant force of your energy, and you choose to eliminate negative emotions from your life. I just have chosen in my life, I don't have room for hate. I don't have room for bitterness. I do not have room in my soul for envy or greed or avarice or arrogance. I don't have room for all those negative emotions in my life. And I want to fill my soul with emotions like love and hope and grace and generosity and forgiveness and mercy and compassion. And that those emotions actually give me the energy I need to live the life that God created me to live. A woman touched Jesus and he felt power leave his body. And when his power left him, she found healing. And when Jesus looked at her, he called her a person of faith because he knew that it requires faith to receive from God the healing that only God can bring. Here's the amazing thing about Jesus is that Jesus is the singular source from which all of our healing can come, where the healing of our deepest wounds can actually take place. He's the singular source that can meet us at our point of need. He's the source of the love our souls have so desperately longed for. He's that source of hope that our souls have so desperately longed for. He's the courage that we've needed when we've been afraid. He's the confidence we've needed when we've been uncertain. And I think so oftentimes we try to prove to ourselves that we can do life without God when we were never created to do life outside of him. I had a conversation last week with a guy who, a really successful businessman, and he was in this group of people that paid $100,000 to be at an event, and they had to minimally make $100 million a year in their company. And I was there as a speaker, and I began having this conversation with this guy, and he told me, we just haven't accepted that we are all God's. And the most important thing I can give to myself is unconditional love. And I looked at him and I said, how's that going? Because one thing I know about you and me and all of us as humans is that we're terrible at giving anyone unconditional love. Not only can we not give other people unconditional love, we can't even give ourselves unconditional love. So how's it going? Are you giving yourself unconditional love? And he said, yeah, it's not going well. I said, that's why you need Jesus, because he's the only one who can give you unconditional love. And I want you to hear me right now. There's no one but Jesus that can give you the unconditional love that your soul longs for. And so if you're listening to me right now and you're in this moment and you realize, I don't have all the answers and there's so many questions that are yet to be answered, but what you know is that you need God. What you know is that you need an unconditional love that you cannot give yourself. You need the love that Jesus came to give you. That's why God stepped into human history. That's why Jesus came in flesh and blood. That's why he allowed himself to be crucified on the cross. That's why he rose from the dead, so that you could know unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness, and through his forgiveness, find freedom and life. And so in this moment, if you are ready to trust Jesus with your life, I just want to invite you right now just to cross the line of faith and pray a simple prayer with me. It's just one sentence. It's not everything you and God need to talk about, but it's where it needs to begin. If you're ready to trust Jesus with your life right now, just pray this prayer. Jesus, I give you my life. Right now, just tell him. Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. If you just whispered that prayer to Jesus right now, I want you to know that God himself has come to dwell in you. And the God whose life is energy, his life is power, his life is strength, his presence, his love is life to you, has just come into your life. And your life will never be the same again. I want to welcome you into this beautiful family of people from all over the world who've discovered there's a God who loves them, and that through his death, we have all found life. Self-mastery. It begins with taking ownership of your life. It moves toward having a mindset where you will take control over the thoughts that can destroy you and allow the thoughts that actually recreate you to sit and rest in your soul. Self-mastery is about harnessing the energy inside of you to create the world that God calls you to create. You may not know this, but there's power in you. There's energy in you to create. And God put you on this planet to create a better world. God bless you guys. And let's step into this space of self-mastery so that all of us can live the life we were created to live and create the world that everyone desperately needs.